Hi everyone, I'm International Master Jeff Lawton. I'm looking at a game from Tata Steel Masters round 5 between former world champion Vishy Anand against Jeffery Xiong, up and coming American, very young American player um, who's got an exciting style, sort of doesn't seem to fear anybody. I'm coming into the game of round 5. We can see that Xiong was on 2.5, and Anand is a point behind on 1.5 because he lost to Wesley So, whereas Jeffery had beaten Jordan Van Forest. So Anand opened e4, e6, French defence, d4, d5, knight c3, bishop b4, the Winawer variation, very double-edged, where black intends to sort of damage white's pawns, but at the same time concedes the bishop pair. e5, sorry, I didn't play c5, but knight e7, a3, bishop takes c3, check, bc3, and now c5. And now Anand played queen g4. The usual moves are queen to c7 or castles for black. Jeffery played king f8, which he clearly had prepared. h4 from Anand, and now h5. So h5, the idea is that, well, apart from gaining time by pushing the white queen back, it also secures the f5 square for the knight. Makes it stronger because g4 can't attack it anymore. Queen d1, b6, intending to trade bishops, and now Anand exploits the sort of weakness left behind on the g5 square. So this bishop is now on a very strong diagonal in the vicinity of black's king, and sort of hinders his development. So queen c7. So black is probably sort of threatening something like this at the moment, and then queen check would be a little awkward for white because you can't easily block it. You can't play queen d2 because the rook hangs, and if you play bishop d2, then the pawn hangs here. So the only thing you'd have apart from those two moves is to play that, but that would run into a disastrous, actually sort of wins white's queen straight away. So white has to do something about this. Doesn't really want to have to take with the queen. So Anand plays rook h3, simply protecting the c3 square. And it's a very nice multi-purpose move. It sort of waits a little bit to see what black's going to do without committing either of white's other two minor pieces. And also the rook can come to f3, where it targets the weak f7 square. So Jeffery played c takes d4, c takes d4, knight f5, and now c3. So the point of b6 is to play bishop a6 and trade off white's good bishop for black's not so good bishop. Usually a good idea. And now knight e2, knight b8, knight f4. So although black has achieved, two of the big goals in the Winawer, if you like, he's established his knight on f5, to which white can't easily drive it away because then hg4 would occur. And secondly, he's managed to trade off his bishop, his white squared bishop. But it's not quite as easy as that because white has gained time and black's having to spend time rerouting the queen's knight. And this knight is now attacking h5, so the only way for black to defend that is g6, as in the game. And now these dark squares are even weak around black's king, especially this one. So it's a very sort of double-edged position. So Anand goes straight in, opening lines on the king's side. Queen takes g4, knight d7, and now rook c1. So there's a pin down here, but if black played knight d4, it's not a good idea because white can play knight g6. C takes, and now the bishop is protecting the rook. And after queen b7, white can play, well, maybe rook f3 first, king g7, and now queen e6 is an absolute disaster for black, as queen e7 is coming. For example, if you play rook f8, then queen e7, king g8 only move, and rook takes rook simply wins the queen on b7. So knight d4 is not a good idea. Actually played rook to g8. Now Anand continued his strategy of opening up on the position on the king's side to try and get at the black king. Queen h5, and now queen c4. So it does look risky for black. His queen is a long way from his king, and white's queen is nearby. In fact, white's got 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces in this area, but he's relying on the strength of this. And now Anand decides to logically play knight e2, intending at some point to come here and trade off this piece, because once this goes, then black's king becomes even more vulnerable, and it's not easy for the king to try and run away because the bishop cuts off the escape squares. So he now played rook c8. But sorry, I just wanted to mention that instead of knight e2, it was actually a much stronger move that the engine points out, which is this rook f3 move, which doesn't look like it does a great deal. It looks like after rook c8, white would just play here back into the game, but it transpires that knight e6 is very strong, which makes no sense unless you've got the engine in front of you, really. And then after rook f5, ef5, white's given up a rook, but now he plays e6, threatening mate in 1. Blacks can either play rook g7, but that runs into queen h8, and then queen h6, and that would win for white. So black should try this move, and then after de5, rook c7 to protect along the rank and cover the f7 square. But now bishop h6 check, and now rook g7 is forced, bishop g7, and now black can't play rook takes because it runs into queen h8 and then quickly gets mated after queen to d7. So rook takes is impossible, so you can play king takes, but then queen g5, and after king f8, white can simply play this, king d2, and now the threat is queen d8, and then after king g7, rook g1. It's a simple looking threat, but unfortunately there's simply no way that black can do anything. You could try, you can't play rook g7 because of queen d8. So rook f3 would be an interesting move for white in the initial position. So after knight e2, which is the game, rook c8, rook f3, and now looks like knight g3, as said earlier, trying to destroy the defender, and then crashing through on f7. But Jeffery plays a sort of fantastic defence, which it's not immediately obvious what's going on. After knight g3, he starts to run with the king. Knight takes f5, ef5, rook f5, and now rook over to g6. So white has won a pawn, but black in return has managed to sort of stave off the threats, and these doubled rooks are active, and so is the black queen. So yes, white's gained a pawn, but in return for a lot of black activity. King d2, knight f8, and now bishop back to e3. So Anand begins consolidating. Knight e6, bringing the knight to a wonderful square. Now black can think about attacking, so Anand offers a trade of queens, and now queen a2 check. It probably would have been better to have gone queen to a4 at this point. The game would still go on after that move. So after queen e2, the game went queen a2 check, rook c2, and now queen to b1. And now Anand played a very strong move for white here, c4, to which Jeffery played rook g4. But before we look at that, we'll just have a quick look at what happens if he takes on c4, then white plays queen c4. And if he tries to play here, sort of coming down the back, around the back, white can then play queen c6 check, king f8, and now very strong move, bishop to h6 check. We can't play knight g7 because it simply runs into queen d6 and then rook c8 mate. So knight g7 is not possible. Similarly, you can't play this rook back to g7, so you can try this rook to g7, but then this time white can play queen c8, preventing the king escaping, king e7, and now queen b7. King f8 runs into rook c8 all the same, and after king e8, white can finish off the game with rook c8 check, knight d8, and now this time queen to c6 check, and everything leads to mate. For example, king e7 check here, and checkmate. So d takes c4 is not a good idea, so Jeffery played rook g4, and now cd5, and now in this position Jeffery played rook takes d4, which leads to a lost endgame. But the alternative was knight takes d4, and this runs into some nice lines after rook c8. For example, if king d7, white can play rook f7, king c8, queen c4 check, and now the threat is to play, well, just basically wins with, you don't need a threat when you can mate straight away, and that is checkmate. And if king e7, white can play d6 check, king e6, rook check, king takes e5, and bishop f4 sort of the cleanest way to finish off the game. For example, if we take here, queen e5 check, king g8, rook g8, king h7, here's checkmate. So instead of that, he played rook d4, bishop d4, and now queen c2 check, king c2, knight d4, king d3, knight e2, king e2, and now this is simply a one endgame for white. And after the further moves, rook g4, f4, rook g3, rook g5, rook takes, rook g8, king d7, rook f8, king e7, rook over here. These two pawns are too strong and black can't do anything with his. King d7, rook check, king back, and now d6 wins for white. For example, well, if you go king f8, it runs into rook check, king g7, and then queen straight away. But there's simply no other moves. I'm struggling to annotate this because there aren't any moves you can do. If you move the king, f7 drops, and then e6, well, all right, let's say you try and do this move. Then white could play rook b8. You could take the pawn and then go here, intending rook f7. And after this, you can win it this way and you'll win f7. Okay, let's just click on a bit just to be clear. a4. And then e6, followed by check and one of the pawns quickly queening. So a really nice game. In this position, after d6, Jeffery resigned. Quick look at the standings. They were the standings going into the round. And then after that game, Ananda's now got himself back up to an even score, 2.5 out of 5. And he's caught up with Jeffery, who's also back down to an even score. Wesley So and Firouzja are in the lead as Firouzja won an endgame against Anish Giri after Giri didn't quite defend the position accurately as the game wore on. So a really nice game by Anand, exciting game. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. Bye now.